So today I'm joined by Austin and Jonathan from Shoplift, and we're going to go into some of the tactics that brands should be using when it comes to CRO, right? Conversion rate optimization. We're going to get into kind of what CRO is, how brands should be kind of handling it. We're going to go into live evaluations on certain brands, massive brands that have nailed this process time and time again. And then obviously we'll go into, Q&A and any questions that you guys have. Please, if you guys have any questions whatsoever, drop them in the chat. We're going to be answering as many as we possibly can. And then also, if you have a brand where you want a live evaluation right on the webinar, drop the link in the chat. And if we have time, we'll kind of have these guys, these legends, kind of analyze and give their points on how to improve. So I think to kick it off, I mean, let's do some intros, a little bit of background. Austin, please, kick us off. What's your background? How'd you get into CRO? And let's start from there.
Sure. I'm Austin. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Shoplift.ai. We're helping e-commerce brands maximize their revenue and get their CAC back on track, like Ashvin mentioned. So how I got into CRO, I actually didn't historically come from a consumer background, but as I got more exposure, I was running a growth, essentially an agency, but as a growth team that was managing, a dozen or a dozen and a half portfolio companies, and a big slew of them were D2C businesses. And the whole model just fascinated me because I knew about legacy, CPG and the whole kind of omni-channel route. And, obviously when you're going into, some of these retailers, the business is completely different. And so when you're selling direct, you have to worry much more about your CAC, much more about, these things that are changing every day. And so started getting into, well, how can we, protect our margin for these businesses? How can we decrease our acquisition costs? Because at the end of the day, if you're selling direct, you live and die by your acquisition costs, right? And so that's ultimately where we landed is looking at some of the legacy ways to do that, because obviously, as Ash mentioned, CRO is not a new thing, right? CRO has been around for a long time. I think what we realized though is that there are all of these, kind of really antiquated ways of doing things and made things very expensive and difficult. And so that's really why we started Shoplift. And Jonathan, you want to kind of introduce yourself because you're a big part of Shoplift. As well.
Yeah. So I joined the team right. I think it was the first hire. So I started right at the beginning, but it was about 2 years ago now. And yeah, I previously worked in e-com at Wix, led an e-commerce team there for a number of years. Worked in CRO, did a lot of stuff around A/B testing, worked mainly in Optimize before. And then I was just like so shook when I saw Shoplift for the first time. I was like, okay, this is killer. So then I immediately had to join the team. And yeah, I lead the merchant success side for us. So if you have questions on conversion and CRO, I'm usually the guy to talk to. And psyched to be here looking at all these stores. It's going to be awesome.
Amazing. Well, I don't think we could have anybody too more prepped to kind of dive into what's going on in the world of CRO. So I think before we kind of kick things off, I want to remind everybody, drop your website in the chat. If you want a live evaluation, we'll get to as many as possible. And then any questions at all regarding CRO, please drop them in the chat. We will answer as many of them as possible as they come up. So use this time to tap into these guys' minds on anything CRO related. So just that reminder there. Cool. So let's kick it off. Jonathan, I think what will be good to kind of really start this conversation is to really understand what are some of the key fundamentals of creating a website with conversion rate in mind.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where it's definitely an ever evolving space, right? So it's always like changing and shifting, but I try to keep it really down to like 3 principles. And you and I, Ash, have met a number of times talking about CRO stuff. So it's something where you're well aware of a lot of these, but I really keep it down to these 3. It's all about simplicity, it's about speed, and it's about what your selling proposition or selling point is, right? Your value prop. So just to get into it a little bit, in terms of simplicity, right? Like keep it simple, stupid is kind of a key tenet of mine for my team as well. And really it's simplicity over complexity. A lot of stores will just take, a long time to kind of get to their value prop, or have many different call to actions, many different points to kind of draw your attention as a visitor, right? And honestly, I think the best thing to keep in mind there is if you're a buyer, right? Like you're a purchaser going to the store and you feel exhausted at the end of your journey, right? Like you feel like, okay, wow, like I'm glad that I found the things I found, or that like I barely made it through it. That's not a good sign. That means that there's a lot going on. And there's a lot inhibiting your process. It should be easy to buy, not rocket science, right? So that's simplicity. Speed is site speed, right? That's obviously, we all know that's a huge piece of these tests. But additionally, it's also the speed of the checkout process. It's the speed of like decision making as the purchaser. It's the speed of the site, but also the speed of every single flow on that site, right? And then the last one, the whole like selling piece, right? And the actual value prop. That's one that's definitely one of the tougher pieces, but also one of the most important. A lot of times, all three of these kind of are at odds a little bit, right? So you might like remove one section, right? Remove a really cool GIF that was actually gonna be a better value prop or better exhibitor of your value prop than if you kept it in the first place, right? So you kind of have to find that right balance between these three different areas. But it has to be something that creates that urgency, that showcases why your brand is special, what those true like benefits, the business benefits and the product benefits are. So it's a number of kind of pieces that you have to keep in mind. But generally speaking, those three principles are kind of the key and everything that I do around A/B testing, right? But that's why A/B testing is so key, because you might have a sense like, I know generally these things are important, but you have to figure out what that right balance is for your brand, right? And every brand is different, every site is different. So finding that balance is kind of the name of the game of A/B testing. And because your brand's always evolving, new products are always coming in, the ecosystem's always evolving, it's going to be an ever-growing space, like an ever-changing space. So you always have to be kind of optimizing, playing that game of min-maxing. Okay, maybe I go a little harder on the value prop, maybe go a little less on, like the simplicity of the site. But yeah, generally, if you follow all three of those, you're good to go.
And just to quickly add to that, I think, there's a big misconception when you're talking about, fine-tuning a site or conversion rate optimization, that it's your site is this monolith, right? Jonathan talked about how they're all, every brand is different, sure, but also every segment, every audience within your brand is also different, right? There, are segments of your audience that are going to react to completely different things. And so I think when it comes down to the value prop or the why should I care of, the value of your product, it's also important to remember that there are going to be completely different formations of the site, even, from a UX perspective, all the way down to the specific content, the merchandising, the pricing, all of that is going to vary. And I think a lot of merchants are surprised by how much it can vary based on the different audiences. So I think that's another core thing as well.
Yeah, no, all great points here. One thing that, somebody had told me, another CRO expert told me around simplicity, right, is to have somebody that's really not in e-commerce at all, right? So whether that's like your spouse or significant other, your parents, or like a neighbor, and have them literally go through your website or landing page and just watch them interact. Like, don't say a word, just be like, hey, go and make a purchase, and watch them kind of like go through the whole process. And if they're struggling with something, then that you have to fix something there, or if the process is simple enough, then great. But that's one of the tips that I've learned and that has really stuck with me when it comes down to simplicity. And the easier something is to kind of navigate, the better off you are. There was a consulting call I had where the website was, I guess, a lot of the traffic that was coming from their meta ads were going to straight up to a collection page, right? And every single product on the collection page, they sold a dog harness, and each product, there was probably 12 products on the collection page, and I couldn't for the life of me understand what was the difference between each harness. And so we sat there and he was explaining it to me, and I was just like, dude, if I can't get it, like, there's no way that anybody else is getting it. So keep it simple. Site speed is always an issue that, people get into because we load up our websites with all these apps and different things that we're trying to test out. And, it's key to removing some of this code and doing these like cleanups like quarterly is very important. And so I love what you guys are talking about in terms of like the key pillars here. Austin, so you've been in this industry for a while, and I'm sure you've seen so many different things that people are testing. But what mistakes have you learned from your experience that everyone is bound to make at some point?
So I always liken CRO to dieting, which doesn't sound fun. But I think the reason I say that is because there's no, like, for anyone who's done a crazy like diet or tried like to, just completely turn your life upside down, there's no like one silver bullet that's just going to fix everything, right? I think it comes down to saying, okay, this is something I'm actually going to like. Obviously, tools like Shoplift make it insanely easy to test, right? But you still want to be like buy into the fact that this is something I'm going to spend a little bit of time on and dedicate, like, let's see where we are in a month or 2 months and kind of and work through that. So I think the mistakes I've seen people make are expecting the world to just completely turn upside down after like a week, people saying, why isn't this working? I think that, your first test hasn't even finished yet. Like, let's see, let's see what happens after that. I think the other thing is, I think people can be precious about copy or things that have been with the brand for a long time. And I think, this classic CRO joke is around like changing the button color, right? That's the test that people want to run. And look, that test can work. It's been well documented that sometimes that test actually is effective. But I think not being afraid to take bigger swings. I think if you spend a lot of time just kind of being precious about everything and only changing things around the margins, you're not going to find those huge wins that are, every site has big wins. No matter how well optimized it is, they're lurking there. And I think not being afraid to go and find those is a big piece of it.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've made, like kind of getting up to this crucial moment of, growth of the brand, but every single change that we made on the website was always like a gut feeling, and it was never backed by data. And I think that hurt more than anything else, because truly when you do make these small changes, there is an impact that happens. Whether or not you can see it or not, right? So for example, more recently we saw a kind of a dip in conversion rate. It was sometime in May, and the smallest change can make a world of the difference, right? And so on our website or on our landing page, we were advertising a spring sale, right? And then started to see this kind of conversion rate dip a little bit. And we're like, you know what, let's A/B test like the theme of the sale. And so we A/B tested now summer sale, right? Because we're kind of getting into the summer season. And just from that, we saw a lift just because it was more relevant and prevalent to that time period. Whereas, these small things, you're just like, you know what, let me just change it, right? To match the time. But my point here is if you are going to make a change, even if it's such a small change, A/B test it and see what the actual lift or decrease really is, so that you can, so that you're a little bit more cognizant of making these small changes, even though it's like, you know what, it's a gut feeling, I'm going to change this. Or for example, if you're going to change your homepage banner, right? Like what does that change in terms of the entire customer experience and journey? So my biggest mistake was not literally testing everything and anything, and just kind of going with my gut instead of looking at the data.
Absolutely.
It's actually,
I know we want to get into, but I just want to add one thing to that is you can get really attached to one metric. Conversion rate is obviously the one that everyone talks about. I think when we talk to a lot of merchants, they realize, I mentioned earlier, there are all these segments of your audience, but there are also all these different metrics that are, driving your business, right? Maybe your conversion rate actually dips a little bit, but your AOV goes up, or your returning visitor rate, because all these different things that you want to, look at, especially if you're running a subscription product, those LTV numbers can, like that can change the complexion of your business. So I would also encourage people not to make the mistake of getting super attached just to one single metric.
Love that. Amazing. Yeah. I mean, to double down on that, right? It's monitoring all the stats that you possibly can, right? It's not just conversion rate. It's revenue per session, profit per session, even the intra funnel metrics, right? Like how many people are adding to cart versus checking out, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's not just one, it's a cluster of everything. So I really want to go and kind of dive into more of the tactical pieces. I'm excited for you guys to kind of do some live evaluations. I want to start with one of the bigger brands that's kind of like trending right now, and that's Skims, right? So would love for you guys to kind of maybe share and kind of run through and tell us how you think about when you're looking at the websites. What do you guys look at when it comes to kind of optimizing the site for conversion, and hopefully it kind of sparks some ideas for the audience as well. And while you're kind of pulling that up, there's a few questions that I would love to answer. Adam had asked, when to consider a whole new lander offer versus CROing a PDP. I have a quick answer to that, but I don't know, Austin or Jonathan, if you want to quickly tackle that one.
Yeah, there's a number of reasons you'd want to consider one versus another. I think generally speaking, if you're considering a whole new lander, I'd be wanting to look at like what is your mix of new versus returning visitors, and what are the devices like that they're hitting your page, right? It's probably majority mobile, I would assume. But generally speaking, I usually take it back to the product itself. And a lot of times certain types of products, certain industries, right? You'll want to have a full breakdown of like a net new lander with a lot of like those different business benefits, right? Like back to the original principles I mentioned, all about that value prop and making that very clear. But you might want to only serve that to your new visitors and not returning visitors, right? You might want them to just be pushing right into the purchase, right? So I would definitely want to better understand like what does the brand look like and what do the products look like. But generally speaking, if you have a sense that, hey, most of the time people really want to dig in, we watch the session recordings, we see them looking at all these different pieces about like the about us and digging in more. Those are all things that you kind of bring to the forefront, and a lander would better serve you than a PDP probably.
Agreed. Awesome. So appreciate the question there, Adam. If anybody has any questions at all, please do drop them in the chat. We're going to get to them. So awesome. To the live evaluations, Jonathan, please take it away. I know you got Skims up here. But yeah, let's dig into it.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, from the get-go, I would say generally speaking, and you'll see as I go through each of these, I kind of like break them down point by point and page by page. But a lot of times I will just focus on the first fold, right? Like just the top of the page. And that's something that generally speaking, as you see with your traffic, I'm sure a lot of people will hit that piece, right? And then they move on from there, but you're going to lose a lot of that traffic. So we will spend with brands maybe even a quarter just on the top of fold for every single, major part of their site. So I definitely spent a lot of time there initially. And to your point earlier, Ash, like getting a fresh look from someone that's outside of the brand that really is like net new is vital for something like this, because otherwise you're looking at the same thing so often. You might miss some things, miss some very, dumb moments. The other thing, generally speaking, is that I'm always looking at these pages on mobile. We are definitely mobile first in all of our breakdowns and teardowns and design. So that's what I'm going to do here is just jump into the mobile. From the get-go, I think Skims, like I really loved a lot of the formatting. I think that they did a great job of keeping things very simple, right? And very concise, getting you right into what their actual like products are, but additionally, what is it that they do? Like, what is it about them that's special and unique? And they really do a good job of like utilizing that empty space, making it so that it's clean, it's concise, but isn't overwhelming, right? It's still simple. In terms of things that I really, really liked, just to kind of jump into some of their pages, when I went into their product pages, right, and I was checking this out for the first time, there were some things I really liked, some things I didn't like. So I'll start with what I liked. They do a great job of really showcasing limited editions and really showcasing the different offers here, right? Like the sizing is very clear and concise on mobile. you get where the CTA is, you understand here's the product that I'm looking at, and they have the price and the reviews all right up at the top. One thing that I really loved is also, as you kind of like go through the image carousel, they've got these really cool pieces that showcase the fabric itself. This is something that like a lot of brands don't do enough. You should always be putting information, whatever you can, either as like a little pop-up or an info bubble, or even in the image itself, right? In the carousel, use those images as a place to like portray more of that information and share that with your visitors. I really, really like that piece. The other thing that I noted, and this is something that they did specifically well with their like bundles or products that they offer discounts. So let's see if I can find one right here. I'll jump into, they had some down here. So as an example, right, I can see that I can, buy more, save more, and they have that little emphasis, but additionally, they have it as a separate CTA, which is really, really nice. I think this is something that people oftentimes won't think about. Okay, what is it that I would want as a visitor to a site, right? Like imagine that you are, you have one hand and only one hand available, and you're trying to navigate and use that store on your mobile phone, right? Like you're trying to do that. Having a button that lets you just quickly, purchase multiple and like bundle them together and shows the price is just clutch. It really makes a lot of sense and might not apply to every brand out there, but super, super useful. I'd say those are kind of like my top big key wins here and what they're doing. Additionally, as I move further down, I did start seeing some sections where I was like, whoa, there's a lot going on. And this comes back to that simplicity piece. They've got a lot of similar styles, more in this color, wear with it, and we think you'd like. So you kind of get trapped in a whole section of, okay, look at all these different, similar things. Really vital to have some of those, right? Like for cross-selling and upselling, but definitely not this many. You shouldn't have like a full scroll necessarily. So that was one thing I thought, they could probably optimize that a little better, make it a little simpler. One test that we run all the time, and it's across pretty much all industries, especially though in fashion, the more that you can build that trust from the get-go, the better. And so even simple tests like just bringing your review section a little higher up, right? Making reviews a little larger, right? Having a quick quote that indicates like, here's why we really love, this product. Those are all things that are pretty much always winners. They're like super, super killer tests. But yeah, those are general thoughts as I ran through this quickly. We usually spend an hour and a half going through sites, so I'll keep it brief.
No, this is great. I'd love to get your take on the next one. I know we have a few more to kind of go through, but I do believe the next one that we have on the list is Glossier. This one, you already have it up. This is amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys recall, but when I believe Harley from Shopify was kind of like, oh, we just brought on Glossier to the Shopify network. Everybody was like, this website's a disaster. I don't know if you guys remember, everything was like, how is this even like a thing? Every CRO expert was chiming in on how they thought the website was kind of structured. And even I took a look at it and I was like, it blows my mind how certain brands are converting, but would love for you to kind of dive into this and give us your take.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because that was definitely something I thought too, like back when they first, went with this design. I think though, generally speaking, they are established enough, right, where they can kind of rely on their returning visitors, but also that vibe of coolness, like that effect, that sense of like what they're going for, right, as a brand really, really, pays off for them in spades here with conversion. Because to your point, even something like the shop now button, immediately I was like, whoa, this is very, very simple. They went like the full simple route, right? Because they don't really talk a lot about their brand. They have one review in here, but it doesn't even say from who or the number of reviews, right? So they really went with like that simple look, but it's working for them. And I think that's because of how they're established, but also, that the vibe, again, like that matching their brand aesthetic and maintaining that, right? Another thing here is that they don't have that full width CTA, but it doesn't really matter, again, if they have that aesthetic and they commit to it and people really resonate with that, especially their target audience. To Austin's point at the beginning, right? Like audiences are different. You should understand each of those target markets and those audiences you're going after And they obviously do super, super well, right? Because that has paid off for them. Additionally, as I went through the site, I was like, yo, this is some really, really cool design choices. Like from that, let's go back to the simplicity piece. Simplicity, easy to think about in concept, right? Like generally speaking, but they even go the route of like, they don't even have a little like icon like that hamburger for a menu. They just say menu. Their search is not an icon. Their bag is not an icon, right? Like everything they do is subtle, but it is very clear and concise and simple, right? And so they commit to that fully, and I think it works off really, really, really well for them. Additionally, and this is the piece I'll call it as like something that I really liked, and I think anybody watching now could definitely try out themselves or think about from their brand perspective. They utilize the carousel here for images, some of the best I've seen. Honestly, like it's incredibly, incredibly well done. Reason for this, they have their first image, a combo of like a lifestyle image with the actual product, right? Very simple, very concise, but you see immediately what is the product, what is the visual if it's worn, right? If it's used, if it's in use, right? And then they move immediately into close-ups, into more action shots, right? You see that kind of progress as you go through the visuals here. And it's all of these images are incredibly beautiful to look at, right? So they did a great job, and this is consistent across their entire store with all of these images. So that's a piece where I'm like, okay, that's really killer. It very much sells the aesthetic, but also like back to this original point, this type of like simple design, but it still kind of doubles the use cases, right, for that initial image and really encourages visitors to click through and start engaging with it. That's an amazing piece of UI that I think is a really, really killer feature. Moving further down, right, I think we get into a space where there were some other things that I was like, okay, maybe the add to bag. It's really nice when you have that price point in the checkout button. So I do like that as the CTA, but it's definitely not built for everybody. And there were some other things like, there's a lot of text here, right? It does kind of force you to scroll pretty far down. So there are a couple other things that I was like, it's probably not ideal or optimized. But generally speaking, the visual aesthetic is the piece that I think, and the simplicity they really, really committed to here. The last thing I'll mention as something that I think they could improve is really the review piece. Again, just to kind of like, I guess, drive home the key test that we pretty much always see as winners. One of those is building trust. The number of reviews and like the quality of your reviews is super important. Now for them, more established, maybe they don't care as much about those new visitors. It's not as an important piece, but I would say that would be an area I'd want to test immediately just because they really don't utilize them a lot. And I'd imagine they have a lot more going for them on the review front than they showcase here. But yeah, those are my general thoughts and feedback on Glossier.
I have to chime in on this one too, because it's just such a so obviously there's been a lot of conversation about this one. My theory with them is this was a huge initiative within their org that they wanted to be so much more than makeup, right? They wanted to sell a lifestyle. They wanted to really make these other categories a priority. And in order to do that, they've really, you can see how much lifestyle imagery there is here. You can see how fun and, kooky some of the products are. And if you actually go back to their treatment of the skincare sections on the homepage, they are very, very toned down, right? So like scroll down to shop skincare, so shop skincare, shop makeup, those are like, extremely mellow. And my sense of that is because they have that brand equity, the skincare stuff is like, that's like the utility. That's like water at this point, right? That's like, you're going to go there. That's just, you don't need to sell that. People are going to go and get their products that they already know and love there. They're really prioritizing these other parts of the business that, they want to expand those cart sizes. They want to expand the categories that they're in. And I think in order to do that, I mean, look, let's face it, they're breaking almost every rule in the book with this site. But, and again, I don't know exactly how some of these metrics are looking for them, but I think they made the cognizant choice to say, look, we're willing to experiment. We're willing to go out on a branch because this is such an important priority. So I think it's actually a good kind of case study in not being so dogmatic in terms of what the conventional wisdom is, and really taking your business from first principles and saying, what are our goals and what is the path to achieving that? And then figuring out how to iterate towards that. And you can see that got them to a completely different place than maybe a lot of folks would have expected.
Yeah. That's really good point. And Austin, to your point too, like we see that a lot with that risk aversion, like the fact that they took this risk and it assuming it paid off because they're committed to it. That risk aversion is definitely a tough thing in testing. That's where obviously, we can speak to having testing like a smaller audience or a sub audience, but sometimes taking those big swings and seeing how it goes, especially if you have strong conviction, like a strong hypothesis, can pay off hugely, right? It's like it's a massive win. So yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying.
Love that. Even Nick was like shocking they don't have any UGC, which I feel like for a lot of these brands, like the UGC. What is the point of UGC, right? It's social proof. They already have the social proof, right? It's a pretty massive brand. You don't need the additional of like, I guess the reviews or like the testimonials or like imagery from customers. You've already established the brand. The proof is already, the concept already proved out. So it's surprising because it's like everything that everybody is talking about right now in like DTC. But for brands like this, it's like you're already established. You don't really need it.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's what they saw. I mean, it's hard to say how much they A/B tested this or if they just did it all in one go. But generally speaking, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Should we move on to the next one, Bombas?
Yeah, let's do it. So the next one on the list we have is Bombas. This is one of my favorite sites, honestly. Favorite brand, favorite sites, but would love to get you guys' take on it.
Yeah, honestly, it's definitely one of my favorites as well, which immediately I was like, I realized I don't think I own anything from Bombas. So it's like, okay, I need to do that.
I'm wearing Bombas right now.
Me too.
You got it.
My favorite.
But yeah, I agree. It's a super, super well put together site. And just like the brand aesthetic, the combination of sections is super killer. I think this is a really, really good example of that value prop concept. Like make it clear what your business is about, but also like what is your ethic as a brand? Like what is it that you truly want to impart to your customers and to your returning customers, right? And it's those pieces like the happiness guarantee that they emphasize, the donations that they emphasize, the categories right from the get-go, super, super clean and concise. And honestly, this is the piece that I think like more brands should be doing, not necessarily on the homepage, I will admit. And it depends also on the number of products that you have, right, as a brand. But quick nav components, these types of areas where it makes it very easy to understand, here are the offerings that we have, right here, and then make it discoverable, make it encouraging to people to check out some of the other stuff that maybe they haven't seen before. But even as something as simple as like engaging with this, right? The fact that they have this menu that lets you then immediately, categorize and then jump right in. I thought that was great. I loved that. So there's a lot that they did really, really well right from the get-go with the homepage. The other thing I'll call out on the PDP level, and this is something that I think a lot of brands need to do if you're not doing it, but also need to test this area if you haven't much, is right around that add to cart. So pretty straightforward, pretty simple, right? Like add to cart. But the piece I want to draw our attention to is around shipping and return policies. Yeah, everyone knows that you should have those, emphasize those, etc. The closer you bring these to the add to cart, the better. Like this is a test that we run, probably at this point, thousands and thousands of times, pretty much always a winner, as long as you really don't like mess up the setup of the test, right? But it's pretty much always a winner. They have it very clear and concise right there next to add to bag. Another thing I'll mention here, and this is something I was thinking for them, making that add to bag button also call that out and say like add to bag with free shipping over 50, right? Or something like that, that just indicates it right within the add to cart. Killer test. That'd be one of the first things I'd want to suggest to them. Additionally, we mentioned that menu piece that they did a killer job with. They have those menus within specific categories here, right at the very bottom. And back to that original point of, design as if you only have access to that one hand and you're trying to indicate. A lot of times the buttons at the bottom viewport, right, like the bottom quarter of the view, are going to perform better than the top just because, they're on mobile, right? But they're missing that here in their main navigation, right? And especially when you're trying to go back up to the top of the viewport, indicate they're just probably not getting, the most out of that traffic that they could. A lot of times I see navigation as an additional hero section, like another chance to make an impression as a brand. And sure, you want to keep it simple. You want to make it easy to understand, but there's so much white space here, right? Like you could still utilize that section and it would be super simple for them just to pop in this right in there, right? So that would be my feedback for them and the things that I would want to test. But generally speaking, really clean store, really good design. Love like their different sections that they have at the top of collections that give more information on the product. It's very killer.
I would add that, or at least how I think about it is, if you're as a user find yourself having to go into that hamburger, as the brand, you've already you're way behind, right? You've almost lost at that point. It's such a disorienting and kind of experience interrupting action to have to take. That's why I think that 4-panel section on the homepage hero is one of the best sections in all of ecom, especially as a brand that's in multiple categories. For example, when we were looking at SKIMS earlier and they had that carousel hero about the Olympics, first of all, we could talk about that as a separate category, but I didn't even know that SKIMS sold men's, for example, or that they were in some of the, so it's like having your offering very clear and getting people into the funnel that they want to get into is such an underrated piece when you're trying to break into a new category, right? Again, Glossier went a separate route in terms of just basically demoting their main category because they felt so confident in it. I think Bombas is the route I love to see people take because it is the most comfortable from a user standpoint and it gets them to where they want to go faster. And you don't have to put people into that hamburger because, let's face it, no one wants to reach all the way up there.
Yeah, I agree. So I want to get into some of the user submitted evaluation. So I have a couple here. John, I'm just going to stick it in the chat if you want to just pull it up from there.
Sure.
We have NutriCanine, which I'm kind of excited to kind of go through.
Canine. Cool.
We'll see how much time we got.
Yeah, how we looking? I don't want to spend too much time dedicated, but
good. I think we can do a couple. So
okay.
Run through it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, NutriCanine. So it's one that I looked at for a quick second beforehand. I mean, generally speaking, one thing that I noted right from the get-go is that they have this get started CTA, right? And it's very clean and concise. And I did note that if you start going through it, it's going to give you a whole questionnaire and then get you into making the purchase. I think generally speaking, from the homepage at the very least, I love the imagery. I love the section that they have below it with the clear CTA. I personally would move this CTA, make it a full sticky button at the bottom, right? Make it something that is clean and concise because they already have this here, right? Anyways, this gets started. But again, as we kind of spoken to, to Austin's point, going in here, you're probably losing them a bit, or at least they're already a little confused. You're trying to figure stuff out. And then additionally, if they've just got their one hand on the phone, you want to make it super easy for them just to click it, indicate it, and make it very simple, right? The other thing that I think that they could do on the homepage in particular, they have a lot of these longer informational sections, super killer sections. Nothing wrong with the information that's provided there. However, I think that they could benefit by maybe making a few of these, a side scroll carousel type situation, or maybe some, accordion sections that minimize, but something that makes it just a little cleaner and easier, especially since you have to scroll pretty far down to get to the how it works and even further to see their plans, right? And maybe people aren't, navigating this far down, but I would imagine that's probably because, you've got these longer sections. So I would really try to minimize that use of the space and make those more nested. And then the last thing I'll mention in terms of, the actual aesthetic and everything, I think that generally speaking, the homepage itself was just very, very long. I think, like making those section adjustments would help with that. But additionally, maybe making some of these sections more like maybe you have an about us or an FAQ page. You might already have some of those pieces. Okay, looks like you do. But I would break those out a little more, and then maybe just have, some of those listed as just quick tags with that quick link, right? And not just have only get started as the CTA. That would just make things a little cleaner and concise. And honestly, you probably could do with hiding some of those sections just to speed up the loading of the homepage as well. Because, as I mentioned earlier, emphasizing reviews, putting that button down here at the bottom, and then reducing some of this vertical space in some of these sections. That way you just drive the eyes towards the areas that are going to convert them, right? Like the things, if for a fact that getting them into the recipes or getting them into the plans helps a lot, then make that front and center and, minimize some of these other pieces of it.
And all the UX stuff to the side, I would just, from a content standpoint, I would say get started is a really ambiguous CTA. What am I getting started with? Also save 50%. You haven't showed me a price yet, so I don't know what 50% I'm saving. You're kind of giving away you're already discounting me, and I don't even know what, the value is yet. And I would also say probably that the freshness, if you scroll up to the H1 there, fresh dog food delivered, I'd say that's probably not your strongest value prop. If I'm gathering that, this is a product, if you're asking my dog's name, I'm assuming going to ask me other things in the funnel, that this is a really personalized, great meal plan for this dog, right? And it's going to help the dog live longer, feel better. I'm going to get to spend more. I think there's a way, higher level of value that you could be driving rather than just freshness.
Yep. 100% agree.
Yeah,
cool.
I love that. I have a note.
Stuff.
I have a note on the headlines, but let me, Jonathan, I'll queue up on the next one while you bring that up. I can talk a little bit about some of the headline testings that we've done. In my opinion, I think there's so many different types of tests that brands can run, whether it's structurally on the landing page, how do you move things around to prioritize information, then obviously offer testing, imagery, and copywriting are the two that are, in my opinion, I think are overlooked. What I would say is, if you haven't done this yet, come up with a survey, right? Maybe it's a type form or a Google form, and just ask the questions to your customers, what are you looking to achieve with the product? What are some of the problems that you're facing right now? If you have been using the product, what has been the outcome? And you'll get so many tidbits from your customers as to why they purchased or why they're happy that they purchased. And take that and create tests on your landing pages by formulating new copy, right? So your headline, especially above the fold, is so crucial, because especially if you're running an ad from, say, Meta or TikTok, that ad has to have some congruence to the landing page, and it has to match entirely, right? And it has to actually match what the customer is feeling. So not only is this super crucial for creating copy on the landing pages, but it could be angles for your ads too. And then combining those two, those are some of the stronger tests that we've had recently. And I urge everybody to be at least, if you're not A/B testing something right now, the quickest and easiest test is just to A/B test some copy, especially above your fold.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Jonathan, I sent over D-Moose if you got it.
D-Moose, let me pull it up. Awesome.
Jess also said, look at your reviews to get some type of copy and insights. No, that's another great one.
How are your customers talking about it? Because, no matter what kind of business you're in, how you're visualizing your value is different than how people are experiencing it. So obviously, you want to be tapping into that. That's a really good point.
Agreed. And one hack that I would say is, if you can export some of this information, reviews, post-purchase surveys, literally uploading it to ChatGPT and having ChatGPT just summarize it for you, easy life hack.
Yep.
100%. Yeah.
So I picked this for you, Jonathan, because I know they have a lot of products. And so for brands out there with an exclusive, an extensive catalog, would love to hear your take on, some of the tips you would do for this.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really good example. generally speaking, for something like this where you have so many different options like equipment and stuff, I personally would push these sections into kind of a quick nav component. Maybe not quite the exact same that we saw with like Bombas, but something where it's basically a carousel of, okay, if you have equipment, if you have weight training, if you have accessories, just have each of those as its own category, right? Like right up here, right underneath the hero. Additionally, one thing that we've tested in the past quite a bit that I think performs well is to something kind of like this with the shop by need. Try playing around with a few different types of categories, because I would imagine some of these pieces around equipment and weight training, right? Like you want to really clarify, okay, what are the categories we're working with? I would say that this shop by need might be a little closer to what you should go for in terms of those options. Just make it super easy for people to click on those things like we talked about with Bombas, right? That's the first piece that I would mention. Additionally, like going back up to the top, I think that this type of, like use code Freedom20, right? Like it does really indicate the sale, which is really good. But I definitely would want a CTA that is kind of more, like take advantage of the sale kind of vibes, right? So like this extended sale is happening now. It's like limited time sale buy now, something like that. Might just be a little more effective in helping people engage with it and really want to focus on it. The last thing I'll mention, specific when you have like a lot of different products, right? I love that you emphasize the reviews here, which I think is really clutch. One thing that I've seen before, which is really, really cool, is having, like the top review by category as well. Something that kind of gets people into those reviews, and they can click on it, they can look at them now, but something kind of more similar to what you have down here with this, like our customers love us, something that really is product specific, maybe to each of those categories, and kind of drives people into building that trust, right? Like build that trust from the get-go. It really, really helps. And then the last thing I'll mention, because I haven't checked out their PDPs directly, but I'd like to take a look at these. Yeah, so one thing here, and I didn't call that out in the Bombas site, but they did a really good job of having their breadcrumbs embedded in the image as kind of like an overlay for the image. That is a subtler test, like it's a subtler adjustment, but it really does perform well. And we tested it a number of times in the past. It might be tougher to do with certain product images, so you'd have to play around with it. But anything that can make the image a little larger and then allow you to kind of like, not have too many different things you have to compute as you're going through the page and kind of scrolling down. That's one thing that I noted right here immediately, because these just stand out so clearly and so starkly to me. And then into the actual add to cart, you've got your, business benefits right here. The product benefits super clear. The 41% off. That's pretty solid. I'd say one thing here too that's really good. Trying to keep this a single line that's really clean and concise is super useful on mobile. But one thing there I'd be curious to try looking at or taking a closer look at is percentage off versus dollars off, right? That's one that we've tested as well in the past. It's definitely dependent on the brand, depending on like the amount of money we're talking about, what is the AOV, all of that stuff. But that's an area that I would love to start testing with them as well, just to see, okay, have you ever tried it in the past? Have you tested it? What worked, what didn't work? And then, play around with that to see if that has an impact on conversion.
This is a CRO classic too, but if you're reducing the price, always show me the higher price first. So if you're crossing out 150, show me 150 and then let me read 89 second, because if I'm reading 89 first, I put very little weight on that 150, right? It's I know it seems very trivial, but it's actually a big psychology piece of you're marking down, and the first price you're registering is that higher price rather than the second price. So, and Jonathan's right about the percentage off piece too. That's always a good test. I think depending on the space that you're in, I would consider doing a dollar off too. In a category like fitness, if you scroll down, how are they doing on upsells and bundling? Yeah, so they have like pairs well with. It would be interesting, and again, maybe they're doing this somewhere else on the site, but having merchandising as a bundle just because of the category. Some categories are very prone to like get the, abs bundle and you sell them like 6 things at once. Just based on the category, I think that would be a good opportunity as well.
Yeah, the upsell cross sell stuff. I mean, we haven't really dug into cart and what that looks like, but there's a lot of really good testing we've done there as well on this type of functionality. But yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, even the bundling piece, or even kind of showcasing, they note that it pairs well with. But another thing that we've also tested, which I find very interesting, is also trying to focus in on discoverability and like what are the things that people might not realize that you have, right? I think Bombas did that really well, but in this case, there could be something where maybe, you try testing the pairs well with, sure, is one piece, but also maybe you want to say like, hey, have you, seen these other sections, right? Like other bestsellers, other new arrivals, things like that can perform really well, especially if you have a high count or percentage of returning visitors. But yeah, all good
Amazing.
points.
Should we try and hit one or two more?
I know we're coming up on time, and we do have a lot of submitted questions prior to the webinar. So before I get into that and we kind of close things off, but I know you guys have a special offer for our viewers. I don't know if you guys want to kind of unveil that right now.
Yeah, so I know we ran out of time today, and this is something that as a team we do all the time for certain users in this kind of verbal format. We'll get on the phone, but one thing that we do for some of our merchants is we'll actually put together an audit for you. And so because of this great audience that we're getting on this webinar, we decided we were sold out for July, but we decided to open up 5 more slots in July. So for anyone that wants to sign up for an annual plan with Shoplift, we've opened up 5 full scope audits in July that you'll be able to take advantage of, which is really good value. They're very popular, which is why they're sold out, obviously. And so very excited to be able to offer that. And that's what we'll be rolling with.
Amazing. No, that's awesome. Thank you guys for that. Cool. So I wanna kick off the last segment with the Q&A. So we'll kind of rip through these. I know we have a few minutes left, but I know some of these we would love to just kind of dive into, but give the most brief answer we possibly can. So given the increasing competition in the e-commerce space, what are the most effective CRO strategies and tools to help a new Shopify store maximize its conversion rates right from the launch?
I would say, generally speaking, I mean, yeah, the competition piece, that framing is interesting, but generally speaking, I mean, the principles I mentioned at the beginning are vital, right? Like that simplicity piece and all of that. But honestly, what I would do from the get-go is kind of map out your ideal customer journey and then look at each of those individual points and make sure it's as simple and as clean and as concise as possible, right? Generally with CRO, I think that's kind of the easiest way, besides also focusing on the top of fold for each of those pages, right? But I think a lot of times people aren't looking at that full funnel. What I mean by that too is, like, for example, we've run tests and analysis for people looking at like, okay, our goal is not just CRO. Our goal is also to see, like, we're going to try to increase the number of exchanges instead of returns, right? We're trying to look at like engagement with the FAQ and then see if we can reduce the number of incoming tickets. So it's things that are also like a little more broad, right? But I like to look at that full journey, from purchase to wearing, right? And like, or purchase to whatever, right? Use of the product, and get that full sense. And I think that's kind of like the best way to kind of frame it initially. There are tons of other like tools and, suggestions that way, right? Different best practices, but generally speaking, that's what I usually would suggest starting with.
Well, that Austin, anything to add there?
No, I agree with all that.
Amazing. So there's a question here, I think, which kind of got sparked from my initial conversation around analyzing customer reviews and survey results. But how do you feel about focusing copy on the highest value customers specifically? So, using that information and kind of applying it across the website. I actually have an answer to this, if you guys don't mind me kind of chiming in here, and then I'll let you guys kind of go there. But I feel like getting very specific on certain copy, especially getting from customers, is a great way to handle customer acquisition, right? You're getting very specific angles, that you can apply to your ad creatives and then also carry over to your landing pages. I think where this gets a little bit messy is, yes, you can have more general copy on your website, kind of stemming from the holistic data that you're getting from all your customers, but getting very, very specific, you kind of cut out everybody, right? So you want to kind of be more general when it comes to these general pages, like your home page, product page, collection page. But when it comes to landing pages, that is the reason for a landing page. It's your core, like, this is what we're going to focus on. Here's the messaging. Here's the ad creative that's trying to drive that specific audience. I want it to be relevant for that person. Everything else, more general. But curious your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say generally, I mean, I totally agree with your sentiment. I think you have to be really careful with those types of focuses, especially early on. I would say, though, I would love to test it, right? Like to run a few different tests to see, okay, what is kind of the sweet spot where maybe I can like win it all, right? Like go after that target audience that, like the high value piece, but additionally include some of these others and try to kind of thread the needle. At least that's what I usually find as we run like multiple iterative tests. We kind of are able to find that idealized version, right? Like that fully optimized version. I think that kind of lets you get the best of both. Generally speaking, I've totally seen this test run before and not perform well at all, right? Where it's like, okay, let's just go after that one audience. We're going to like change everything just based on that one like concept or, persona of that customer. And then suddenly their conversion just tanks, right? And their AOV might go up a bit, but it's like, whoa, we made some mistakes here potentially. So that's where I would always caution, like, if you're going to do it, to your point earlier, Ash, it's like test it for sure, but also like test any of those little incremental changes just to make sure like you're good to go. Try to insulate yourself from risk. I don't dislike it as a concept in general, but I've seen it burn quite a few stores for a bit. So it's definitely something I'd be cautious of.
Absolutely. I got one more question for you guys. I know we're at time, but thank you so much for everything so far. I want to leave everybody with this last question, which is, how do you effectively A/B test? Like, how do you effectively run A/B tests?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts. Austin, do you want to jump on that first?
From just a tactical standpoint, I mean, I think putting together a plan, as I was saying earlier, about what metrics are actually going to make a difference in your business. As Jonathan said, no two businesses are the same. So what are your unit economics? What are your drivers of business? What are your goals over the next 6, 12, 18 months? And then putting together ideas, which Shoplift can help you with, by the way. If you go to shoplift.ai, Shoplift will give you recommendations on what to test. But not only that, it will actually, with Lift Assist, give you new features that you can add to your live website, right? So in terms of testing, I think the limitation has always been you need a designer, a developer, you need to hire a strategist to actually, or a guru of some sort, to tell you all of the things that you need to do. And what Shoplift is trying to do is give the power back to these merchants who can actually, do all of the steps themselves, working directly within, the Shopify ecosystem. And so that's really my biggest hack would be, obviously I'm biased, but using Shoplift to help you get there.
But I know we it's a fully loaded question, and I definitely I was curious how you guys would answer it, and you guys did not disappoint. Thank you guys so much for hopping on. This hour flew by so quickly. A lot of value here, diving into different brands altogether, big ones, especially. And thank you guys, Jonathan, Austin. Thank you for being here, answering some of these questions. For everybody who's kind of watching now, don't forget the Shoplift is offering a free audit. So definitely check that out when you can. Last thing, hopefully, if you enjoyed this, please let us know feedback. We're always looking to improve our webinars. So any feedback that you guys have, small, large, lay it on us. But thank you guys so much, and we'll look forward to the next one.